it was quite an important personal thing for me because only a few months before I'd been a member of the Labor Party down in Tasmania, where I grew up. I was secretary of the Young Labor down in Hobart, and only a few months before I decided to part company with the Labor Party. Let's put it this way: my ideas were moving to the left, and theirs were moving to the right, and there had to be a party of companies. And for me, speaking of war, the real sort of turning point issue for me was actually the record of the then Labor government and its continued complicity and support, both military, diplomatic and moral, for the ongoing Indonesian occupation of East Timor, which had cost, you know, in excess of 200,000 lives at that point, or a third of the population of East Timor. And for me, that was just too much. I mean, if Labor politicians weren't prepared to cross the floor of Parliament against that, then what were they prepared to cross the floor over? So anyway, for me, in little old Hobart town, at the age of about 19 at the time, getting this first copy of the Green Earth Weekly into my hands and actually distributing it on the streets down Salamanca markets in Hobart was a big deal. Because Hobart's a small town, and it's got everyone kind of knows everyone, and so, you know, by me clutching this paper down at Salamanca markets and holding it up and shouting out, you know, no war slogans, no blood for oil, that sort of stuff. As I said, in a small town where sort of everyone knows you, there's, you know, within half an hour there's going to be half a dozen friends of your parents, you know, former school teachers, friends, ex-friends, all that sort of stuff passing by. You know, your sort of your views, your politics is going to be out, you know, and in people's face. But anyway, what as history has proven, what a correct thing to do that was, you know, and think about the fact that not only the lives that were cost in that 1991 Gulf War, then the subsequent 200,000 Iraqi lives that were lost as a consequence of the US, Australian, British blockade of Iraq, and then the subsequent invasion of Iraq, where to date 1 million people have died as a consequence of that invasion. I mean, these are the estimates. And so, I mean, you know, talk about a common thread passing from 1991 to today, our 20 years of Green Earth Weekly, when the people of the Middle East are still engaged in an absolutely epic battle to assert their control over their own lives and their own dignity, free of foreign interference. But I suppose one thing, you know, as we all know, that is a beautiful thing to celebrate is that we've got some good news stories coming out of the Middle East in terms of the struggle of ordinary people in the Middle East in their struggle for dignity and justice and democracy and a fair distribution of wealth. So that's a fantastic accomplishment. The other thing that I sort of thread I draw between 1991 and today is that, you know, a crucial catalyst for change has to be people having the courage of their convictions and putting themselves out in harm's way, out in the street, saying, "Here I am. This is what I stand for. Come and get me." You know, and you know, in a much smaller way than the epic occupations we've seen in Tahrir Square. You know, every time activists in this room take their activism out onto the street, putting up posters, selling newspapers like this, handing out leaflets, they're doing that. And I think one thing that I think is interesting is that the internet is an amazing tool, and the things that the internet has created are fantastic tools, and activists should use those tools to the best of their ability. But they're only tools, and you know they're tools that demonstrate their use and their power for actually organising people to get out on the street. You know, people talk about it being an internet revolution. On one of what's happened recently in Egypt and Tunisia, on one level, of course, it was and it is. But it still requires that courage of people to get out on the street to show what they stand for. And that's why, you know, we've had some debate within Socialist Alliance about, you know, the future of our newspaper and where it goes and that kind of thing. And although you know, many more people read it on the web than in paper version. Of course, back in 1991, there was no web version. That's why I'm very convinced of the idea that a newspaper still does need a paper version, especially a campaigning newspaper. That's campaigning, you know, for all manner, you know, in struggles against all manners of injustice and oppression and that kind of thing. Anyone can put a blog up on the internet, but it takes a qualitatively higher level of conviction and courage to actually get out on the street and be seen to put your money where your mouth is, you know, in terms of your ideas, and people gain a respect for that, you know. And I think we've seen that in big ways and small over the last 20 years, and we've seen it, you know, especially in big ways just recently in Egypt. So, congratulations to Green Left Weekly on 20 years. Hopefully there'll be another 20 in whatever form that may be. Who knows? And thanks again to everyone for coming along and helping us celebrate 20 years of Green Left Weekly.